Neil Armstrong was a famous American astronaut known for being the first person to walk on the moon. His first spaceflight was as command pilot of the Gemini 8 space capsule, which was the first spacecraft to rendezvous with another in space. The mission was, however, cut short because of a wiring malfunction that caused the craft to spin uncontrollably. Armstrong was, however, able to regain control by sending some precious fuel. This meant that the craft had to return to Earth. A couple years later, Armstrong re-entered space as a backup pilot of Gemini 11, a relatively uneventful mission. Only a few years after that, Armstrong was recruited for the Apollo program, the successor of the Gemini missions. This was perhaps the most famous space program yet, as it called for the spacecraft to land on the surface of the moon. In training, Armstrong was nearly killed by a malfunction in one of the lunar landing training vehicles. The training craft began to bank dangerously, and Armstrong decided to eject. Analysis suggests that if he had ejected only half a second later, his parachute would not have opened in time. The training vehicle was destroyed on impact. Despite this, the Apollo program was given a green light. After Armstrong was given the backup commander position on Apollo 8, he was offered a position of commander on Apollo 11, the first spacecraft to land on the moon. He gladly accepted and was then fired into space aboard Apollo 11, along with Buzz, Aldrin, and Michael Collins. The ascent and separation went as planned, but as the LM, or lunar module, descended toward the surface, Armstrong calculated the LM would overshoot the landing site by several miles. To add to that, a string of computer alarms went off in the cabin, tempting Armstrong and Aldrin to call off the landing. By now, the LM was speeding over the desired landing location, and Armstrong saw that the LM's automatic guidance computers were heading for a landing in a very unsafe rocky location. Armstrong decided to bite the bullet and take manual control of the craft, a very risky and tricky thing to do. Armstrong and Aldrin sped over the moon's surface, now burning very valuable fuel that was required for the LM to blast off and dock with the mothership. If Armstrong could not find the landing location soon, he and Aldrin would be stuck on the moon. Finally, after several nerve-wracking moments, Houston received the famous words, "The Eagle has landed." After securing the LM, Armstrong and Aldrin suited up for one of the most famous events in America's space race, the very first EVA, or extravehicular activity. Armstrong stepped down onto the surface and said the famous words, "One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind." After performing some experiments on the moon, Aldrin and Armstrong headed inside the Eagle to prepare for blastoff and rendezvous with the mothership. The blastoff went as planned, as did the rendezvous with the Columbia, the mothership. Then the Columbia blasted out of lunar orbit and entered the atmosphere, splashing down into the Atlantic Ocean. The now famous crew was picked up by the USS Hornet. I hope you now see how Neil Armstrong is one of the most famous characters in America's history.